Decision making, dealing with uncertainties and risk, going beyond common sense, experience, judgment, intuition, gut feel, etc., which is what we normally use to make decisions. When we deal with uncertainties, we need to consider the following. 1. The likelihood of the event occurring. We refer to this as event probability. 2. The likely consequences associated with that event and the magnitude. We refer to this as impact probability. And finally, the level of tolerance. This first video is one of 2 videos on this topic, and this video will deal with single criterion decisions, and the next video will deal with multi-criteria decisions. The best way to deal with the single criterion decisions is through an example. So let's get started. Zandu Traders has an option to purchase 1 million kilograms of molybdenum from the Zaldivian government at a price of $5 per kilogram. The owner, George Zandu, feels that he could sell this at $8 per kg, a substantial profit. However, due to a dumping dispute, the US government has threatened to ban all imports from Zaldivia, including MZ. So we can only assume there is a 50-50 chance that the license might be granted. This is just an assumption, and the intent is to see how this assumption affects our decision. So George Zandu has the following options. He can contract to purchase, but if the import license is denied, the opt-out cost is $1 per kg. That's a loss of $1 million. The other option is to apply for the license and wait till the license is granted before closing the deal with Zaldivia. Unfortunately, then there is a 60% probability that a competitor might take Zaldivia's offer. What should he do? Here we have the decision tree model of George Zandu's problem. He has 2 choices: contract to purchase or wait for import license. I want to draw your attention to the 50% chance of the license being granted, and also the 60% chance that this would be sold to another broker. The red and blue scroll bars can be used to modify these numbers and look at the impact. Under this scenario, the recommendation is to contract to purchase. However, as I change that probability to 40%, the decision is reversed. Now it is better to wait for the import license. Now this kind of study can be best carried out with a D-zone map or a decision zone map. When we look at this map, the first thing we observe is this demarcation line. To the right of this line is the zone for purchasing. To the left is the zone for waiting for the license. The horizontal axis is the probability of the license being granted, and the vertical axis is the probability of this being sold to another broker. As you can see, it's at 50% and 60%, and that intersection is actually this diamond pointer. When the pointer is in the purchasing zone, the recommendation purchase. As we change the probability, the decision will reverse. Here it says wait for license. What is important to know is the distance from the pointer to the demarcation line this way and also this way. So these are the degrees of freedom you have in the decision making process. This is a problem where the decision maker had 2 choices: purchase or wait for the import license. What happens when we have 3 possible options? Well, let's take a look at one. Your company requires the metal MZ and your only source is from Africa. However, due to political instabilities, there is a potential threat to supplies, basically contract fulfillment. For this analysis, let us ignore cost issues and only focus ourselves on getting the metal. If you recall, earlier we discussed probabilities, and I referred to event probabilities and impact probabilities. Here's an example. On the left-hand side, we have event probabilities, and on the right-hand side, we have the impact probabilities or the consequences. So there's a 20% probability that there would be riots in Congo. Associated with that, there's a 22% chance we would get a 95% of our contract fulfilled, 49% probability that we would only get 71% of the contract, and the balance 29%, the estimate is about 43% of the contract. Similarly, for the other events, we have associated probability. Sometimes people ask me, how do you get all these numbers? Where do they come from? Well, I must admit, they are best guesses or estimates. Now, sometimes this information comes from reliable sources based on various scenarios, but it doesn't matter where the numbers come from or how accurate the numbers are. Because think about the scenario if you didn't have this technique, you had to rely on common sense. Then you've got to play in your mind with all these event probabilities. Don't you think it is better to use a structured analytical method, even if the numbers are not exact? Because with our decision zone maps, we can actually look at the sensitivity and the error levels of our estimates. Here we have the decision tree model of the sourcing problem. Under this scenario, the recommended decision is to source from Congo. Let's look at our decision zone map. Here we have 3 scroll bars now. The red, which reflects the probability of Congo riots. The blue, which reflects the probability of Sierra Leone's coup. And up here, we have a brown scroll bar that reflects the probability of Angola's new governor, which is at 35%. Under this scenario, the recommendation is to operate from Congo. Now here we have 3 zones, and the center point is known as the triple point. And observe, we have the triple point fixed with Angola, and if I change that, the triple point moves. As before, we are now in the Congo zone, and by changing the probabilities, we can suddenly move to Sierra Leone. Or moving upwards, we go to Angola. And if we have some doubts now, we can go back to Congo. So you see, management can now sit at a table and discuss the exposure levels. And once again, this horizontal distance from the diamond to this zone demarcation line horizontally, or from the diamond to this demarcation line, tells us how much latitude we have with our assumptions. There is absolutely no doubt this is truly a very powerful technique. Now, in this case, we only discussed procurement. This could be 3 retail sites, or 3 international projects, or 3 pieces of equipment, or 3 candidates that you wish to hire, and you have certain concerns. We encourage you to visit our website or write to me at author@XpertUS.com. We don't sell our software. They're available free of charge. And by the way, don't forget to watch part 2, which is very interesting.